Hey, it's Nikki, and today's episode is a special series called In the Loop, Communicating for Maximum Leadership Impact with my friends from Borshoff. I am a huge fan of the work Borshoff does to advance internal communication, and so happy that they have joined Gut Plus Science for a special series. Get ready for internal communication inspiration. There's so many nuggets of wisdom here.
Hey everyone, welcome to In the Loop, Communicating for Maximum Leadership Impact. I'm Katherine Coble, your host, and I'm really excited to bring you this monthly series that explores how you, as a leader, can become a better communicator. Thanks for listening. Let's get started. So I love this bit that comedian Jerry Seinfeld does. This is what he says. According to most studies, people's number one fear is public speaking. Number two is death. Death is number two. Does that sound right? This means that to the average person, if you go to a funeral, you're better off in the casket than you are doing the eulogy. Well, for most of us, getting up in front of people really does cause some anxiety. Maybe we don't hate it so much that we'd rather be dead, but I know I still get nervous anytime I have to speak in front of a group. And if you're a leader, you will have to present or speak in front of groups as just a regular part of your leadership. So if you want to get better and you want to feel better about your speaking abilities, then this episode is for you. Now, today, I want to focus on speaking to internal groups, your employees. These tips are going to help you no matter who the audience is. But as a leader, getting your team aligned and communicating well with them is one of the most important things that you can do. And when you communicate well, you get everyone going in the same direction, you can reinforce your company values, and you really do create trust within your team. Now, speaking can take many forms. Some of them may feel easier than others. It might take the form of a town hall, maybe your team meetings, a big event, but they're really all the same. They all require that we use clear language and that we can inspire and move people to some sort of action. Now, in my time working with leaders, I've seen leaders generally fall into one of three categories when it comes to public speaking. The first is the leader who feels anxiety about standing up in front of employees, and they're not sure that they can be inspiring. I've also worked with some leaders who say that they aren't inspiring, and they're just fine with that. They just want to get up, tell people what they need to know. Forget the theatrics, they say. Well, that may sound like you're being modest, but really, if you aren't taking the time to think about how you can add some inspiration to your talks, you're doing your employees a disservice. Inspiration isn't about drama or theatrics. It's really just about connection and relevance. Now, the third type of leader is typically the one who doesn't believe in any preparation at all, thinking that speaking is just another form of sharing information. These leaders tend to stand up in front of a group of employees and just start talking. And they realize about halfway through that they're rambling and employees aren't even paying attention. Well, that's no good. Now, all of these can be barriers to leading well, but being a compelling speaker doesn't have to be hard. It really just takes some preparation and some practice. So that's what we'll talk about today. Now, before we get into the how of good public speaking, let's talk just a little bit about the why. Because if you really know your why you're speaking to your team, you're more likely to get the how right. So start with just asking yourself a few questions. Do you want to motivate your team? Do you want to share some sort of a strategy or create some clarity around some company goals? Maybe you're getting ready to make some significant changes in the organization. Or maybe you just need to calm some fears during a time of uncertainty in the company. Whatever it is, get clear on your goal first. Then you can focus on the what and the how. Now, to help make this real for you, here's an example of a topic that you as a leader may need to share with employees in a presentation or a speaking situation. Let's say that you've decided you need to talk to employees about a shift in business strategy that the company is going to make. This shift will mean that we're going to go after a new customer segment and we're going to offer a new product. It also means that we have to change the way that we work in some pretty significant ways, and that we need to have some new skills on the team, and we don't currently have those skills. Well, that's a lot of change, so we better be sure that we share the news and really explain what it means to everyone. So in this example, we know our why. We need to communicate because we're changing some big things. And we need everyone to understand what's coming and to really understand our expectations. Now, before we get into the what, let's think about some of the factors that will influence how we might speak to our audience. First, we need to be sure we really know our audience. Do we understand what our employees are concerned about or what motivates them? If we can anticipate the things that they're going to be concerned about, then we can tailor the message to address those things. Now, to get a handle on what those concerns might be, we can refer to some past data from an employee survey, or if we don't have data, we can spend a little time gathering some feedback from some of our managers, and that'll help us really understand where employees' minds are at. Next, we want to be sure that our communication is transparent and authentic. Employees really do appreciate honesty, especially when a message is difficult. So in our example, we said that we're going after a new customer segment and that we need to change the way that we work. Change can often feel like a negative for employees. And while you can talk about the positives of change, and you shouldn't be afraid to also address some of the challenges that are going to come along with it, at least at a high level. Employees will appreciate the transparency. Employees also like to see their leader as a human. So be sure that if you have them, you share some personal stories or maybe some examples that can help bring your point to life. A certain level of vulnerability really resonates with employees, so don't be afraid to use it. Another thing that we want to be sure we do in our communication is to simplify complex ideas. Now, one of the quickest ways to lose your audience is by being too technical. Break down high-level strategy or technical concepts into more relatable terms. Also, remember that you are speaking and people can only process so much information and really retain it. So, don't use a speaking opportunity as a way to try to dump every detail on your employees. Instead, just give them the high-level overview. And you can always follow up, and you should follow up with something in writing that has more detail, maybe even a video, an email message, whatever it might be, so that they can go back to it multiple times as they digest the information. You can also use some visual aids as you're presenting, or use some actual verbal metaphors that help resonate with employees and really give them a picture of a process or the impact of a change, whatever it is that you're communicating. When you simplify these ideas, it can really help reduce the anxiety that employees have, and it helps to break things down so that change can feel more realistic to them. And lastly, you want to be intentional about engaging emotionally with your employees. You know, human beings are both rational and emotional beings, and we really need to appeal to both sides of the brain when we want to engage them. So that means thinking not just about the facts and the information, but also how that information makes them feel. Does it concern them? Does it excite them? Does it maybe confuse them? Can we tell a story of some sort that helps them see themselves in the change that we're asking them to make? These are all the things that will help connect our words with the actions that we want to see from our employees. So use those stories. Okay, so we've established why we want to talk to our employees, and we've thought through the challenges that we might face. We're ready to move on to the what and the how. When you get ready to speak, the first thing that you should do is check in with yourself. Are you nervous? Maybe a little bit of nervousness is actually a good thing. It's healthy and it shows that you care. But if it feels overwhelming, just start with a really simple breathing exercise. Take a slow and full breath in and out, and that will help you reset yourself. Pause and smile, and then start. Never feel like you should be pressured to jump out of the gate too fast. Sometimes a pause may feel awkward to us, but it's really not awkward to the audience. So don't be afraid to use a pause. Now, here are some additional things that could help in terms of better delivery as you are speaking. First, be sure that you're using clear and inclusive language. Try to avoid as much corporate jargon or overly technical terms as you possibly can. If you have to use some corporate terminology, just be sure that the first time you say it, you offer a very short definition of what you're referring to. So here's an example. I'm going to talk about KPIs. I would probably say it's something like this. Now, our KPIs, or the key performance indicators that really help us keep score on how the business is doing, those were on track in the first half of the year. So you see how there in the middle, I just gave a little bit of an explanation. I didn't just use the acronym and I didn't leave it to interpretation. I gave a definition of what KPIs were. Now, the key to using inclusive language is to create a sense of belonging for everyone. Now, when we think about inclusive language, we often think about things like gender-neutral language. Don't say you guys or refer to people with a gender element such as linemen or mailmen or something like that. But inclusive language is also about representing the whole company. So be sure that you speak to roles and employees who represent a variety of areas in your company. As an example, don't just focus solely on customer service agents when you're speaking about customer service, especially if you are trying to build a culture where everyone contributes to the customer experience. Your speech will also be clearer if you work to eliminate any sort of qualifiers or filler words. Now, these are things like kind of, things like that. We've all heard them. Using a lot of these types of words makes you appear uncertain and unprepared. And this is actually an area that I have gotten really serious about over the last decade. I made a conscious effort to eliminate filler words from my speech. And one way that you can gauge how much you do this is to either record yourself on video, delivering some sort of remarks that you're going to be giving, or to ask a close friend or a family member to listen to your remarks and to count the filler words. You'll probably be pretty surprised at what you might learn about yourself. I know I was, and a real conscious effort to get better at this has really paid off for me. Now, another way to improve your delivery is to look for ways to boost your interaction and your engagement with your audience. This can be if you're remote and you're doing this over some sort of a Zoom or Microsoft Teams, but it can also, of course, be in person. You want to encourage Q&A. Just be sure that you're asking for feedback either along the way in your remarks or maybe at the end. If you've got a large group and you're using a platform like Zoom or Microsoft Teams, there are built-in tools for this, and you should encourage the use of feedback through chat functions, Q&A, and those kinds of things. This really does help employees feel like they're participants, not just passive listeners. Also, before you speak, try to gather some points, maybe some stories or anecdotes that you can use in the presentation itself. That'll help to show connection to employees. This helps them see that you're not just droning on or lecturing them about your ideas. You've actually spent some time getting insights and feedback from employees on the subject that you're communicating about. It makes them a part of the story. Another crucial part of your delivery is your body language and approachability. This is, of course, things like the openness. Are you facing the audience? Do you have an open posture? Are you using conversational tones? Are you making eye contact? smiling, things like that. Also, if you are at a podium for your remarks, step away from it. You don't necessarily have to do this for the entire thing if you need to have notes close by, but anytime there is not a physical barrier between you and the audience is going to feel more connected to you. So think about how you can bridge that gap. Also, be sure that you are acknowledging employee contributions during your remarks. So recognize team or individual achievements during the presentation, and that will not only boost morale, but it'll reinforce positive behaviors that you're looking for. It's also a good idea to have the names of those that you might want to recognize written down so that you don't forget anyone, you don't forget someone's name, or maybe you have a difficult pronunciation. You want to think about those things, have them close at hand, and make sure that you've practiced them ahead of time. Preparation and intentionality is what it really boils down to. Employees give weight to the words that leaders say. When you speak to them as a group, you have a special responsibility to be clear and engaging and focused on them. Taking the time to think through your presentation and using these people-first tactics are going to help you gain trust. And there's a great book called Presence, written by Amy Cuddy. She's also got a TED Talk that I'll link to in the show notes. I think Amy does a great job summing this up really well in her book when she explains that when we meet new people, we quickly answer two questions about them in our minds. Can I trust this person? And can I respect this person? Now, the first question about trust speaks to the characteristic of warmth, while the second about respect speaks to the characteristic of competence. Now, most leaders want to be known first and foremost for their competence. That makes sense. But the problem with only focusing on competence is that human beings tend to prioritize warmth over competence. Doesn't mean that competence isn't important, but it does mean that people want to know that they can trust us first. And then only after they know that they can trust us, will they value our capability. So, as we wrap up today, think about the ways that you can focus your presentation on warmth first, followed by competency. Don't overdo it on facts and explanations and rationale. Speak first to the human element. Speak from the heart. Help your employees feel your empathy, your understanding, and your desire to connect. Your warmth as a leader will help you communicate in ways that employees will follow. And that is how you can lead with maximum impact. Thanks for listening.
We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.